Hello and welcome to the Levels Plus Whenever the Them Game Awards that I do 2023. Woo! Um, it's been a really good year for games in terms of the product. Not so great in terms of how they're made. There have been numerous, far too numerous layoffs across the industry in games media and in freelance work that I'm immediately starting this show off with because I want to be better than the actual Game Awards. um, it's a really crappy situation for lots and lots of developers, journalists, video essayists, and beyond. And I hope that everybody who has lost a job in the industry this year can get back on their feet somehow. And if that means leaving the industry, then that's probably the best thing you can do. It's a really crappy situation, and it really kind of mars what otherwise would be a pretty dang good year for video games as a product, as I said at the top. And in terms of indie stuff, I didn't get a chance to dive into too many indie games that came out this year. I'm hoping to catch up on quite a few of them in 2024. So yeah, that's a little bit of my intro monologue, is that in terms of physical, actual, delivered product, video games had a wonderful year. In terms of the cost of making them, video games had a horrible year. In case you missed it, the actual blog had a whole bunch of posts go up this last week. So my favorite streamers' video content, my favorite album and song, my favorite video game remix, and my favorite video game soundtrack and song all had their own posts because they involve video content, or trying to get the sound of something into your ears. So I'm not going to get into those too much here because those posts already exist. I'll just, for those particular subjects, I'll just say what my favorite one was, and you can learn the rest by visiting the posts, which are also in the description of this video, in case you want to go check those out. So I'm going to start at the bottom of my list here, which doesn't necessarily have any ranking, it's just how I structure it. And we'll work our way up to the game of the year, and we'll end on that. So, favorite streamers, content creators of 2023. Well, my absolute favorite video that came out in 2023 was HBomberGuy, YouTube and plagiarism. Fantastic deep dive into a very prevalent problem that I don't think, despite, in the aftermath of watching the video, it's been talked about a lot, but I don't think it's been talked about on the scale of reception that this particular video gathered. It is very clearly a problem that several content creators are using other content creators, other authors, other writers, other documentaries even, to basically steal their own content from, and the creative ways that they do so. It was a very good video that breaks down 5 particular channels that have had some major issues with plagiarism, and delivered with HBomberGuy's usual talent for delivering such heavy content with the right amount of humor, the right amount of ethos, the right amount of research, and the right amount of just knowing what emotion needs to go with the particular scene. It's extraordinarily good. So if you haven't watched it, yes, it's 4 hours, but it's kind of worth sitting through, because it has had significant impact, not only in YouTube, but it's starting to gain traction in mainstream media as well. So if you haven't watched it, I highly recommend it. My favorite TV show and or movie. I'm giving it to Barbie. I was very impressed with that movie. Taking a corporate icon as Barbie and actually getting any sort of messaging into it is quite an accomplishment. And while sure, it could have gone harder into feminist discourse, it could have gone into other discourses, for the type of movie that it is, which is about a very, very, very divisive in ways toy targeted at a gender, it handled its feminism, it handled its discussion of gender and sexuality very, very well. And it was also extremely funny with incredible casting, really good songs and soundtrack, and a compelling enough story despite the limitations of, Mattel owning Barbie, and therefore their input is all throughout the film. You know it. The fact that Mattel let this movie exist as it is really quite remarkable. So I have to give it to Barbie. I walked into the theater thinking that it would be good, but I didn't expect it to be that good and to end up being a movie that I'd actually want to own. So kudos to the team and Greta Gerwig and Margot Robbie and Ryan Gosling and the rest of the cast for just making that movie sing, and not just at the musical parts. I also enjoyed John Wick 4 immensely and Loki Season 2. Best song of the year. I'm giving it to the Linda Lindas. Yay! They released Too Many Things as just an individual song in 2023, and it is a bop, and it is still stuck in my head. It is the song I have loved listening to the most this year. I imagine it'll be on an album in 2024, but since they released it on YouTube as its own thing with a music video, I decided to include it. My favorite album of the year is the Aces' I've Loved You For So Long. I'm a little surprised because I thought Covet was going to walk away with this one with Coronal, which is a spectacular math rock EP that I really enjoyed, and I've listened to it at work like 24/7 along with the rest of their content. But the Aces album just it came, I discovered it right when I was starting to really get into Isolate, and because Isolate has a lot of theming that I think the Aces music and who they are as people tie in really together very well. It just clicked, like bam, I love what I'm hearing. So that's why I picked it as my album of the year. So this is a new one. I don't have Best Retro Comp this year because I didn't really get into any comps that came out in 2023. Primarily because there wasn't many that actually caught my attention. The only one that I think that I feel confident talking about in any way is like the Ninja Jajamaru collection, and that's not worth putting on a list. Not necessarily because of the games, they're not super well known, but just because Strictly Limited works with Rai Talaka, and they have a wrapper that they just spit their products through, which works out just fine. It's a perfectly okay emulation wrapper, but it is lacking in features, it's lacking in pizzazz. It doesn't really scream out that a lot of love and attention went into it. If you compare it to like the Ninja Turtles Cowabunga collection that came out last year, or Capcom Fighting collection that came out last year, there is a distinct difference in how those are presented. So I didn't feel comfortable giving it to them. I don't have the Ray's Arcade Chronology yet because the physical got delayed, so I can't talk about that. I got Taito's LD disc collect or LD game collection, I think is what they called it. I haven't played any of them yet, so I can't really talk about it. And the way that they released it is 3 individual titles that you just jump into. There's no like consolidated wrapper for it. So it again doesn't feel quite like I could award Retro Comp comfortably given all of those factors. So for this year I have Best Video Game Remaster Remake Without Drastic Reinvention. So Resident Evil 4 Remake falls out of this list because it is a drastic reinvention of the game. But we have stuff like Metroid Prime Remastered, and Ghost Trick, and Star Ocean: The Second Story R, and Super Mario RPG that I think fit that very well. And out of those 4, because those were the 4 contenders that I had played a little bit, Metroid Prime Remastered is a superb and exemplary example of a remaster done well. So the best remaster examples I can think of is Okami HD, which takes the PS2 game and brought it to PS3 and then subsequently modern consoles with the right amount of texture updating and model updating, and just makes it look like you remember it. And that's what I feel a remaster is trying to accomplish. And Metroid Prime Remastered is now, like, in my opinion, the new exemplar example of how to do that extremely well. And it also came out of nowhere. It was rumored, but Nintendo just kind of shadow dropped it back in January, February, and it's extremely good. The game itself, there's some things about it that haven't aged perhaps as well. It'd be nice if there was actual, like, more teleporters around so you didn't have to wander around quite as much, and the fact that you can't really pinpoint where hidden items are outside of a noise is a little bit of an issue. Like, you won't know if you cleared out Chozo Ruins, for example, 100%. It won't tell you that. And that would have been nice, so that way you could just stop looking around in those areas. But, outside of some quality of life things that would have been nice, it is a masterful game still, and the remaster, it looks like I remember it, which is basically what I want. It also has a really nice selection of remastered art assets, which are really fun to look at. So it's not just like a straight port. Now, of course, Metroid Fusion's connection's gone, so you won't get the NES Metroid. And I don't think that the Fusion suit's an option in this game, but overall, it's totally fine that those things are not there. And on the whole, what they have done to make this game look fantastic on the Switch, it's one of the best looking Switch games, when it was already one of the best looking GameCube games. So that says a lot. Out of the other 3 that I mentioned, I think Ghost Trick is second best, followed by Star Ocean. Ghost Trick really shines with the jump from the DS to, in my case, the Switch. It is beautiful. It was beautifully animated then, and now you can really enjoy it and appreciate it. The remastered music is also a huge improvement over the DS. So that is my second pick. I haven't replayed it in full, but I played it enough to just know that Capcom did what needed to be done to make that cult classic of a game sing. And then Star Ocean Second Story R is just beautiful. Like, I played probably 3-4 hours of it before realizing that a super long RPG is not really what I'm in the mood for. But it's got brand new visuals that look incredible. Like, they captured the intention of the PS1 game, but they do it in a way that is very modern and very well executed. It's not smudgy, it's not glossy, it's just like super high-res pixels that look fantastic. And really well done 3D backgrounds with really good lighting. All that comes together to really make it look beautiful, and the remastered soundtrack is also great, and there's a lot of quality of life improvements to the game that I appreciate. So that's why it's my number 3. And, honorable mention to Super Mario RPG, which also did a spectacular job. Video Game Book of the Year. I am giving it to The Art of River City Girls. It's a yearbook. It's a really clever design. Fangamer did a fantastic job on this. I happened to get one of the ones that are signed, so that's really cool. So here's just an example. Like, it just is a well-made book that just leads into this yearbook concept, which is perfect for it. It covers all 3 games in the River City Girls franchise. The production value on this is premier, as I would expect from Fangamer books. They've won in the past. They are winning again. Second place goes to Sunsoft Chronicle, which is a really well done book that came out in Japan about Sunsoft, and it has a lot of art. So here's some examples of art, and it has a lot of development history and advertisements and interviews in the back that I can't read because it's in Japanese. But I really like the book. I think it turned out really well, and it has a lot of really nice stuff in there. And then last but not least, I've only flipped through this because I haven't got into Tactics Ogre yet, but I love the art for a Let Us Clean Together PSP, which is basically what this is. I will attempt to open it to something that's just, here you go. And I hope to get into Reborn more in 2024, so I can actually say I have played Tactics Ogre, and then I will feel comfortable flipping through it. But it's a really nice book. Square Enix did a nice job on it. Toy. Well, we'll go ahead and lean off with... It's probably not too surprising that I picked the Figma figure of Metroid Dread Samus. It is high quality, as one would expect, and well worth the wait. I pre-ordered this, I think, like late last year, and it is absolutely awesome and super posable. And I was watching somebody play Metroid Dread earlier this week, I want to say, and I was like, ooh, there's so many cool poses that I actually could put this figure into. Runners up, I love this Splatoon amiibo, and Nintendo released Deep Cut finally. I'm going to attempt to hold them all up at once, because I finally have them all at once. There we go. The quality of these are super, super high. I think the Splatoon amiibo are the nicest ones Nintendo puts out consistently, and they continue to rock it with the Deep Cut amiibo. And they also released all the Tears of the Kingdom amiibo, which Zelda's there. She's just hiding in the background. There we go. Let's just make everybody even. These are all super, super good. There we go. These are all super, super good. It's unfortunate that there was such a gap between Zelda and Ganondorf and Link. I don't even think I've scanned Zelda or Ganondorf into Tears of the Kingdom because I just haven't put it into the Switch the latter half of the year. But those are also extremely good amiibo. Alright, we're going to run through the video game music stuff real fast because, like I said, there's posts for those so you can actually go listen to them. My favorite video game remix of the year was actually for the Super Mario Bros. Movie. I thought that Video Game Remix's take on Jack Black's Peaches was phenomenal and fun and really energetic and took the song in a delightful direction. And that I just thought it was a bop and loved it. So I kept that as my favorite remix for all year. And it still is. My favorite video game song comes from Fire Emblem Engage. It is Trial of Blazing Sweep Across, which is Lynn's theme when you take her on in the whatever they call those battles. Paralogs? I don't remember. That song was a favorite since Fire Emblem on the Game Boy Advance. I've loved it when it pops up elsewhere, like in Fire Emblem Warriors, but this is definitely the best take on that song, and I adore it. in Engage. All of the remixes of classic Fire Emblem songs in Engage are really, really good. But it wasn't quite enough to enter the top 3 for the best soundtrack, which ultimately went to Super Mario RPG 2023. Yuko Shimomura came back and gave that soundtrack so much love and care and attention. It just takes those iconic songs from that original 16-bit sound and just really gives them a new life and a new energy that I personally really loved. Easiest cakewalk of the year goes to DuckTales 2. First time I had played it, and ultimately it's a very mediocre sequel. It does add some new wrinkles to the gameplay, but I don't think those wrinkles were necessary. The new level designs and music just aren't as captivating. It's a totally fine, okay game, but considering it came out like in 1992, 93, it's just not impressive. But also, it's not very hard. It didn't take too much for me to get through the game, and honestly, I think it was like an hour, and I didn't get the best ending. I didn't find all the map pieces, but I didn't really care to go revisit the levels to go do that. Block Block was the number 2 on that, which is Arkanoid, but I played it on the easy mode, so it was very easy. Hardest challenge of the year, I actually have a physical thing I can hold up, is Ninja Jajamaru Ginga Daisakusen, the 5th and final Ninja Jajamaru game on the Famicom. This was played via the compilation that I mentioned earlier. And it is a pretty decent platformer, but there is 1 or 2 areas in that game that are absolute misery to get through, and I was just really stubborn and decided to get through it. Very charming, though, and I would argue it's among Jaleco's better games, but it still has these 2, like, difficulty spike areas that just kind of murdered the joy of playing it. SCAT by Natsume is the other one that I thought was really hard, but this one, it was in a good way. I really enjoyed playing SCAT all the way through early this year, and I appreciate being able to rewind. Makes things a lot easier. So, we'll jump into the dubious awards now. The dubious awards of the year. And unfortunately, they both go to the same game, but for different parts of it. So, the absolute worst game I played in 2023 is Fire Emblem Engage's DLC, Fel Xenologue. I am so upset at how bad they made that. Absolutely the worst Fire Emblem character of all time has been introduced in Fel Xenologue. Rafal is a terrible character. Not only is there the bait and switch where he comes off really meek and really dependent on his sister Nell, but then for no reason he just becomes evil. And the game doesn't explain it extremely well. He's not her actual brother, but just like a dummy put in by Sombron in that timeline. But like all of his justification for doing anything that he's doing is not explained very well. All of the stuff that he's doing to Nell makes no sense. And he has like the worst personality ever. And they want to redeem this character. They want you to have this character who turns on you midway through the Xenologue, does horrible things, kills people for no reason, and wants to take over this particular dimension that you're in, and basically renders Alear even more incapable than the main game presented them. Um, it's just pile of inconsequential, inane bullcrap that I was miserable to play through. And like the probably the top of this shit sandwich, and apparently again we're breaking the levels plus whenever no cussing policy because it's just that bad. Like the redemption just makes no sense. Like, why are we redeeming this character? Why do we want this character? Why would we want to take this particular character into the main game after all of the things he did in the Xenologue? It makes no sense. And then you can't New Game Plus this. So these characters are going to come into your game super late. You're not going to want to use them unless you absolutely fell in love with them in the Xenologue. But you've already had hours and hours of development of your team by the point you usually would jump into this. So, like, for me, I already beat the game by the time the Xenologue came out. So I basically have them for the last chapter if I want to fight Sombron again. I don't. Which we'll get to in the next award. So it was just like, what was the point? What was the point of this Xenologue beyond adding 5 characters, 4 of which are okay, and 1 of which is just misery incarnate? The absolute worst thing you could try to redeem. I just don't get it. So that is my worst game of the year. That I actually sat all the way through, and that I didn't finish. Mega Man 3 for the Genesis was a very disappointing conversion. Some of the music by Kino Yamashita was well arranged, but outside of that, it just doesn't feel right, it doesn't look right. There's stuff that changed that made no sense why they changed it, which I go through the documentation of that in my Levels Plus Plays video covering those 2 games. So if you want to learn more about why I didn't really care for that game, you can watch that. And the Daggerfall, which I decided to revisit. There was a mod that kind of cleaned up some of the glitchy factors and cleaned up the visuals a little bit. It is just too massive. It is too big, and like just trying to even wrap your mind around the scale was too much for me. I just felt like I wasn't, like I was just that inconsequential in the world, and that's not a good place to be in an open world game. Biggest disappointment goes to Fire Emblem Engage. Whoo! Fire Emblem Engage. Everything about what I understand about the development of Fire Emblem Three Houses and Engage makes so much sense. So, Engage and Three Houses were developed concurrently by different parts of Intelligent Systems, with Three Houses primarily being developed by Koei Tecmo and their Omega Force team. And there was a different approach to both games. So, with Three Houses, they wanted to really lean in on the social aspects of the characters. So the writing is infinitely better. The characters are much better written. They're designed in a way that I think that it ties into their personalities really well. So it's not as extreme or as like pronounced, perhaps, because they're all in a school setting. And just generally speaking, the narrative focus was a huge reason why I love Three Houses. It is in my top 5 games ever released, and it is some of my favorite absolute character design, some of my absolute favorite character performances, and I have to limit Three Houses characters on my favorite character list because I could probably stick 20 of them on there. But then I'd have a top 100 characters with 1/5 of it being Fire Emblem Three Houses. So I don't think that's really fair. So I adore Three Houses, and the knock that people have against it is the gameplay is not as tactical, it's not as crunchy, it's not as strategic as people would like. The maps aren't as interesting. I don't mind that. That doesn't bother me. So the gameplay for me is like, I have this great connection with Edelgard and the Black Eagles and all of the students we've recruited. I love going out into combat and seeing them fight stuff, despite the fact that a lot of the maps aren't as compelling as in past games or even in Engage, because Engage's focus was on gameplay and tactics and making the strategy piece the emphasis. And the contrast is very clear, because the plot is basically Awakening plus Fates, but too much Fates by the time you get to the end of it. And it's not interesting. Allier's not a great protagonist. They are very much a repeat of the past, but they don't earn it the same way that the characters of the past had. So you get to the end, and Allier is made the new emblem, and you're like, okay, I guess, just because they're the protagonists, they are. And it's like, that's how you feel. You don't feel like they earned it. And they love going into the let's kill the characters but bring them back again well in this game. Or why won't the villains be different? And they want to redeem everybody. They want to redeem anyone who has a tinge of villainy. And it works against the game really badly. Sombron does not need to be redeemed. The the 4 hounds do not need to be redeemed outside of the one that joins your party. That makes sense. But the characters, there's some good characters in Engage that deserve to be in a better game that incorporates them into it better. That's the biggest issue I have with Engage. That's why it was a disappointment, is because they took a really bright, colorful, dynamic character designer and let her have a lot of fun designing these characters, and some of them are absolute trash fires. Gold Mary, I hate you, you narcissist. Get out of here. I don't hate a single Three Houses character in terms of the playable ones that you can pick. There's some that I don't want to interact with, and I don't use them, but I don't hate a single one of them that I have played. I haven't played Dimitri's campaign, and there's a reason, because I don't want to hate Dimitri because I'm going to. I know that. I've read up. I've heard up. I know what goes on in his story. I don't want to engage with it. Haha. With Engage, I don't get that option. I'm stuck with all of these characters that I don't like, that I'm not going to want to use. So when I actually get to my worst character list, there's going to be like 3 or 4 from Engage, and I don't think I'm going to pick a single one from Three Houses, because the emphasis isn't on the characters in Engage. So they just went very tropey, very generic, very like uninteresting, or very like, ooh, let's be kooky. And that really backfired against it. So we have like wonderful characters like Marin and Yunaka and Tamara locked in with absolute atrocities that I don't want to interact with at all, but I'm forced to because of the way this game works. And so that is why it's my biggest disappointment. The gameplay is phenomenal. The soundtrack is good. The character designs are great. But the way that they lost the social aspect and didn't put the story as any sort of emphasis, they wanted to make it classic. Well, no, don't do that again, please. We have evolved. Three Houses came out first. You showed what is possible for Fire Emblem as a narrative. And even though Three Houses has flaws, it was rushed. There was stuff that's missing. There's stuff that's not as in-depth as it should be. There's a couple bad decisions that were made, especially in Dimitri's campaign. It's a compelling arc that feels like you fulfilled something, that you're taking on the role of Byleth led to something that actually was consequential for that world. Engage, I don't feel that. I don't feel like I earned anything. That becoming an emblem, becoming the dragon, the good dragon, I forget what they called the good. Is it light dragon in this? I should know. They talk like there's characters who say her name and say that title all the time. Divine Dragon. There we go. It came to me. Came to me eventually from a character whose name I don't even remember, who I despise because I have blocked her out of my mind. That's why it's my biggest disappointment, is because Three Houses informed me what Fire Emblem has the potential to become, and Engage decided to not go that way. It went a different direction, and while the gameplay is amazing, that's why it's disappointing, because I can't love the characters as much because they are not as deep, and in some cases they're outright despicable to even interact with. So, Engage was disappointing, yeah. I had two other games that I got quite a bit of disappointment from. Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. I finally got to play it. Yeah! I had to play through story mode to unlock some things, and wow, that was such a bad idea. There was so much that Street Fighter VI learned from Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, I am 100% positive. In terms of how to handle single-player content, because Infinite did not do it well. And there's just so many executive, corporate mishandling on Disney and Capcom's side on that it is just, it's unfortunate in so many ways how botched a release that was, because it basically killed it. I don't think we'll see another Marvel vs. Capcom new game for a long time, if ever, and we will be lucky to see a compilation outside of arcade one-up cabinets. That's how I feel the damage Infinite did, and you can tell. The gameplay itself is good. I mean, it's not terrible, but everything around it is just bad. Visuals, bad. The soundtrack, not compelling. The backgrounds, bad. It's like, if we were to judge this game on aesthetics, it would be among the worst I think ever released. But that's the unfortunate thing. It's like Capcom and Disney just absolutely screwed over this project by corporate meddling, by not having X-Men, that was a huge thing, by trying to mimic what Mortal Kombat was doing, by trying to turn it into a lot more of a live service type of game. It just, no, don't do that. And Street Fighter VI learned a lot. It still has a bit of the microtransaction problem, but in the grand scheme of things, it learned so much from this disaster. I don't know if I'm really that gung-ho about getting into it and like learning it, honestly. That's how much of like a souring effect it had. And it's unfortunate because I can tell the gameplay is pretty good. It's just, I don't like looking at it. Resident Evil 3 Remake. Oh, that was... You know, I knew in advance, because when I was not equipped with a PlayStation 4 or 5, and I was watching all of these remakes come out, I watched people play them. And like Resident Evil 2 looked great. Resident Evil 7, I watched that so much that I don't have any interest in playing it. Because I know it. It's like there will be no surprise, there'll be no impact for me if I play Resident Evil 7 at this point. But like 2 looked really good. Like I wanted to play it so bad. And then the same thing happened with Village. Like Village, yeah, I've got story issues with it, but it's fun. I enjoyed playing it. And I watched people play it, and I enjoyed watching them play it. So it was like the same deal. Same thing with 4. I watched a couple people play it, and I was like, you know what? I want to not have everything spoiled for me on this. So I'm going to not watch it all the way through. I got enough of a sense like, yes, this is what I wanted it to be. I'm excited. That's actually a reason for me to get a PlayStation 5. I did it. I played them all that I wanted to play in the Resident Evil remakes. 2, Village, and 4 did great in their own ways. Village is the weakest of those 3, but 2 and 4 are on my top 111. 3 is not on anything. 3, and I argued this in my video about talking about all these, so I will keep it short. 3 is what happens when I feel a expansion that was planned for RE2 gets transformed through corporate interests into a full product without giving it the resources, time, or staff to do it right. RE3 lost its central mechanic in Nemesis to Mr. X in 2. And the way that the new team that was created to primarily work on 3 had to come up with this entirely different concept for Jill's story and for Nemesis's involvement didn't work. It doesn't work the same. The areas to explore are much smaller. Like that, the big part of Nemesis was exploring Raccoon City. You don't do that very much here. It's very contained. And that is what I kind of feel generally about RE3 is it's contained. There's not a lot of creativity. There's not a lot of exploration of how we could make this a revamp of the original game. It's like we got to compress. We got to get this out in a year as a full game, and they didn't land. It just did not land. The intended outcome did not land. It feels inconsequential compared to 2 and 4. As its remake brethren around the same time frame. It doesn't have the impact. It diminishes Jill's important story the same way that the PS1 Nemesis kind of did the same thing, because it was also kind of an afterthought. When Code Veronica was deemed not worthy of a number, and they wanted to get another numbered game on the PS1 out before the system transitioned to the PS2, that's what Nemesis was. It was basically a let's make another game really quick. And, you know, I will say this, Capcom nailed that again. But they didn't land it as well as they did the first time. And it definitely was disappointing to play. It has more enemy variety, a lot more. That's good. So that would have been a great thing if it was an expansion to 3 or to 2. But it's like it cut out huge parts of Nemesis, and it cut out Nemesis as an imposing antagonist. Now he's just annoying. Now he's just a pest. Nemesis is not a pest. He's supposed to be like this looming dread. And they lost that to Mr. X. Mr. X became that. And the team didn't have time to come up with a better system, or didn't want to mimic themselves, which honestly they should have. I think that in terms of a first-person take on a Metroid game, it hasn't been topped. It's still a phenomenal execution of the process. The scanning brings in a lot of depth and personality to the overall environment. Brings out a little bit of Samus in terms of how research-minded she is. She doesn't talk outside of grunting, which Jennifer Hale does probably still, like, I think the best voice for Samus, honestly. And I just think that overall that Metroid Prime is a phenomenally good game that, despite its troubled development, came out like beautifully. The biggest knock I have about Metroid Prime Remastered is the fact that they just kind of skipped over the original dev team credits. They just say, "Oh, thanks, team." So that kind of sucks. And again, continuing the woes of the industry that we are currently in, losing those credits in a remaster is really, really bad for developers, because then you have to, it just makes things muddy. So it's like, I worked on Metroid Prime, not on the remaster, but because the remaster is the one people are going to look at moving forward, my credit on the original game might get lost or confused. That sucks. That's not fun for anybody. Last but not least is Last Blade 2. I really adore that fighting game. I think it's a really, really underappreciated game in SNK's library. It is gorgeous with beautiful sprite work. It controls really well once you kind of get into how it functions. It's very different from like Street Fighter or King of Fighters. It's not even really like Soul Calibur, which is the closest comparison I have, even though it's a 3D game versus a 2D game. It just works a little bit differently, and once you kind of get into it, it's like, ooh, this is really good. So I was experimenting with a couple different characters earlier this year than my usual, and enjoyed it a lot. So, fantastic game. The best non-2023 game I had not played before is Transaruby, which I just missed. It came out in 2022. This was my second surprise of the year. I picked it up because I had heard pretty good things. It's by Skip Moore and published by Fly High Works, and that's the super rare physical version that I showed you. I really liked that game. I really thought it was excellent. It is a Metroidvania, so you're kind of wandering around on this alien planet trying to figure out what in the world's going on. The story is not really coherent or important, but playing as Tsurubi is really, really fun, and the power-ups she gets to improve her skills are really, really fun. And the visuals are very well done. It's got a good boppy soundtrack to it. It does get a little, like, I didn't 100% the items because I was just like, I had wandered around for so long that I was just starting to get tired. But I enjoyed it immensely. Like, the boss fights were really clever. It's just a really good game. It's a really surprisingly good game. I really liked Kamiko, and that's why I picked Transaruby up, and I'm glad I did, because it's on my top 111. It's my favorite non-2023 game that I had not played before. Resident Evil 2 is number 2, and I think that it is again, Capcom is killing it on these remakes, save one of them, which we talked about earlier. But 2 is really, really good. I really enjoyed it. I think that the changes to characterization were really, really strong. The way that Ada and Sherry are incorporated into it now are excellent. Sherry is probably the most traumatic gaming experience I've had in a long time. That is just too real, but it needed to be. It shows how scary humans can be as well. Not just the undead. Not just bioweapons. People, too, can be absolutely terrifying, and that I think is one of the reasons why I think the remake succeeds so well. It captures that element extremely, extremely well. But it plays great. The new level design for the police station and everything is really good, and the boss fights are really engaging. The biggest knock I have on it is that it lost a lot of the enemy variety. You're down to like 5 basic enemy types and a few bosses, which is okay. The increase on Mr. X being a constant threat for both characters, both routes, was a great choice. That adds so much tension, especially in Leon, since Leon has to deal with him more. And on the whole, it's a really good game. Despite what little nitpicks I have about, oh, I wish there were more enemies, or I wish this area was more prominent. It's good. It's really good. It's great. Great. Great game. River City Girls 2 is the last on the list. It's number 3. I think that it did a lot to improve the formula from RCG, so it replaced it on my top 111 list. The new characters are really good. Marion and Pruby are great additions with their own very distinctive movesets. The plot is goofy. The music by Megan McDuffie continues to soar. I was really glad that I was able to give some nods to music last year to her work, because she's just killing it on this series. It's just a little bit glitchy. It's got some weird glitchy points, and those secret areas, I don't know who thought that was a genius idea, but that was a really bad idea. Especially because one of them is in a glitch area, like really bad glitch area that's not fun to try to get in and out of. And trying to get the secret area to magically happen in that glitchy area was not enjoyable. Otherwise it probably would be higher, honestly, because I really enjoyed that game. I think that the voice work is great. The story is much better in this game and is not as mean-spirited towards Misako and Kyoko like it was in the last game. And it doesn't do the bait and switch of, oh, they're actually stalkers. Like the original game originally had as the ending, thinking that was funny. No, it wasn't. So they learned their lesson. They did a good job improving upon that aspect. So if it wasn't for the secret areas being just a really poor execution, I probably would be giving it a higher rank. But alas, they're there. I had to go through them. All right. Well, here we are. Game of the year. So let's recap backwards. So we'll lead up to what the game of the year is. Oh, this was hard. Like, once I got into the top 3, this became so difficult because these 3 games really, really fought for my attention. And I put hours upon hours into all of them. Street Fighter 6. It's number 3. So like Street Fighter 6 World Tour Mode. I love World Tour Mode. That is so much fun. I had a great time taking Vivi and putting them into that world and using that as a means to kind of get a better sense of where they're going as a character. And that was fun. That was great. That entire experience, I think Capcom nailed it. And it also brought out the personalities of these iconic characters and the new faces really effectively. Like getting into like Cammy's love of cats and dislike of dogs. I still remember that very distinctly because it was just really, really neat and well written, and the voice acting is good for all of the characters. The recasting on some characters was an improvement. I just think it's a great experience, and that's not even touching the rest of it. Street Fighter 6 made me love Street Fighter again. I fell off with 4. I tried 4 twice. I tried Vanilla 4 and I want to say Ultra 4. And I just don't, that's how I feel about 4. I didn't like the way it looked. I didn't like the way it played. I didn't like the way it sounded. Everything just was not clicking for me. And then 5 was like, here it is again, but worse, right? So I was just like, am I going to actually be able to engage with Street Fighter the way I was able to as a teenager that brought me into loving fighting games the way that I do? Am I going to get Street Fighter Alpha 3, Street Fighter, Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo, Capcom vs. SNK 2? Like, am I going to get that Capcom again? Third Strike, is that Capcom gone for good? Am I ever going to get a game that makes me think of those days? Well, it just took a long time. But with Street Fighter 6, I feel that again. I feel like I want to be engaging with Street Fighter on a level that I haven't felt in like 20 years. And the online play, I'm not going to pay Sony $60+ to fight people online. I'm sorry. I don't have that much compulsion to do that. So that entire element of the battle hub is lost on me. But thankfully, Fighting Ground exists. So there's just a regular arcade mode. There's training. There's tutorials. There's the ability to fight people locally if that ever happens. I mean, like, it's not a game focused entirely on online, and that's why I really feel so passionate about how much I adore Street Fighter 6. It's the game I've wanted from Street Fighter, from fighting games, for a long time. And I'm so glad that it exists, and I'm so glad that the character designs just hit me really, really well. Like, I love every single character design in this game, except for Blanca's third costume, because it's lazy. I wish the monetization was not so predatory. I really want those third costumes, but I am not paying fighter coins bonanzas to do that. I'm not going to do that. I am resisting, and if you can't, I understand, but I just cannot support that. I will wait for a sale on those costumes, and then I will consider getting some of them. I'm not falling into that trap. So I'm hoping that Capcom in 2024 will revise how they're doing that type of stuff, because it's very bad. And it really is the biggest reason why I think it's number 3, honestly. It could have been higher, because I really loved World Tour Mode, and I really loved the direction everything else is going in Street Fighter 6. Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom is number 2. And before I bought the PS5, if I had not bought the PS5, it probably would be Game of the Year. And I wouldn't even be having this argument over these 3 games. Because I can clearly go, well, Super Mario Bros. Wonder is not as good as Tears of the Kingdom. Like, there's a very clear, like, I have that line. But when it came down to these 3, I was like, why is Zelda number 2? Zelda Tears of the Kingdom is a freaking-tastic game. It takes what Breath of the Wild delivered and basically triple sizes it. It's more of what made Breath of the Wild so good. It refines some of the rough edges that marred Breath of the Wild, so like you actually can deal with climbing in the rain a little bit better. That's nice. Thanks to both gear and potions that help you with that, or elixirs, I guess they call them. But as well as also, you have a rune that lets you go up things if there's a flat surface above you. So it's like there's considerations to some of the complaints that the original game had, and everything about Tears of the Kingdom is polished and pristine and superbly executed. Here's why it's number 2, and why it was arguing with Street Fighter 6 even, is ultimately the ultra hand mechanic is clunky, and the game really wants you to use it, and it's not something I enjoy, like, being forced to do. That's it. That's basically the main thing. There's other nitpicks I have with Tears of the Kingdom. I feel that Zelda is undersold again. This is the best Zelda the series has ever had, and while she has an extremely great moment in this game and does some really cool stuff, just imagine being able to play as her doing that stuff, even for a little bit in a Dragon's Tear thing. The way, like, Mia is used in Resident Evil 7, for example. Like, you find a tape, you put the tape in, you play as Mia for a little while, you get some background, you get some story bits, you get some explanation for why she's acting the way that she is. Just imagine that with Zelda and some of those Dragon Tier moments. That would have been amazing, but they didn't do it. And it's frustrating that The Legend of Zelda continues to not have a playable Zelda in its mainline games. It's frustrating. And especially when they had the best Zelda that they've come up with. The one that was there, the one that was perfect to be playable in this game. And they just... Nope. They also did a couple things that seem questionable in hindsight. They got rid of the ability to wear Vey clothes altogether, which, there was a reason why it was problematic in Breath of the Wild because of how you got them. They did a little transphobia there. That character doesn't exist in Tears of the Kingdom. That entire concept of Link dressing as a woman to get into Gerudo Town is gone. That entire plot point doesn't exist. And to build off of that, because that's like, I think they got the wrong lesson out of that. But there's stuff that's continuity-wise is weird about Tears of the Kingdom. Like, where did all of the Sheikah tech go? It just kind of disappears. And the official explanation is it just wandered off one day. That makes no sense. Like, I understand, like, Guardians in general have been transformed into the towers, which, that's a really cool throwback to those enemies. But there's not a single Guardian to be found in Tears of the Kingdom. They're all gone. The 4 Guardians that you went through, I don't remember what their official name is, but the 4 big dungeons of Breath of the Wild, they're not here. They're gone. They just wandered off. They just decided to go visit Lorule for this game. It's like there's stuff that I think is really captivating, like the Zokai, I think that's right. That whole thread is really fascinating and well done. But it's like there's just stuff about like continuity from Breath of the Wild to here that it just is like I don't understand why they didn't incorporate some of it, or at least give an in-game explanation for it. It's like I had to find that piece about the Sheikah tech out from the director in an interview because it's not in the game. It's just, they don't talk about the disappearance of that stuff. So there's little things like that, and like your house. So in Breath of the Wild, you buy a house in Hatenko Village. That's now Zelda's house in Tears of the Kingdom, inexplicably. So that seems to create this idea that maybe Link and Zelda are in a relationship, and since Link's out all the time, Zelda's there more, so people think of it as her house. There's no real in-game explanation for that, beyond, fan speculation. But on top of that, the new house that you get, it's more Ultra Hand stuff, and it's clunky, and it's like I don't want to learn how to build a house with the Ultra Hand. I want to just have something like it was in Breath of the Wild. So that's a little frustrating too. It's like the things that there's just stuff that I feel like they did such a great job bringing all of the gameplay and all this stuff, but it's like they were so committed to this Ultra Hand concept that it hurts the overall impact of the game in some ways for me. And like there's just elements that I just don't care for. Like I don't like for me, like the Lego aspect is not there. Like I used to love Legos, but I just don't want to play Legos in Zelda. It's like I would rather just have a vehicle just there that didn't break after a while because it ran out of Zokai atoms or whatever the reasoning is for the gliders to break so fast. So it's just like those are the types of things that I feel knock Zelda down, which is unfortunate because it's a phenomenal game. It plays super well. It looks fantastic on the Switch, and it has some slight engine problems, but it's really smooth for the most part. The soundtrack is expanded and really builds off of the excellent vibes of the original game. The new characters are great. There's some really great narrative moments. There's some really great story beats. The bosses are much better in this game. and the final fight, which I'll not spoiler here, is among the best in the series in terms of awe and spectacle. But that Ultra Hand, that continuity, those are the things that knocked it down for me. Number 1, the game of the year, is Resident Evil 4 Remake, which is why I didn't talk about it earlier. So, Resident Evil 4 came out in 2005. 2004? How old is this game? I think it was 2004. On my birthday, in 2004. Rewrote what 3D action games are. And became like a standard bearer of, like, in terms of that generation, it is one of the greatest games of all time. In terms of the entire medium, it's one of the greatest games of all time. So the team at Capcom had quite a task in front of them. And following the disappointment of Resident Evil 3 Remake, they pulled it internal. They were going to have the same team do RE4. But then they decided that since RE3 was not as well received, we'll pull it in-house. Resident Evil 4 is a fantastic game. I love it to pieces, but it has some problems, especially when it comes to Ashley and Ada being sexualized. And the remake, for the most part, removes all of that. It gets rid of Leon's casual misogyny. It gets rid of the majority of Luis's more blatant misogyny. Ada and Ashley are wearing outfits that are more practical and are not as sexual. Ada is still a little bit sexualized. There's still some camera shots that are like, hey, look at her ass. But it is much reduced in contrast to the original game. And you can't upskirt Ashley. The fact the entire dynamic between Leon and Ashley is different and improved. Yeah, you could kind of see maybe Ashley has a bit of a crush on Leon, but in the great scheme of things, that's not the dynamic like it becomes an RE4 original. And Ashley's also like age appropriate. She's supposed to be like 2021 in RE4 original. She doesn't, like, the voice actress and the way that she acts doesn't really suggest that. Remake remedies that problem. The new voice actress feels like she's older than in her teens. Feels like she's bringing real emotional heft to the character. And the way that she's written is much better. She's not as childlike. Which is an improvement across the board in every respect. Ada is still mysterious and aloof. Some people thought she was too aloof, too distant, but I think it makes sense for Ada as a voice actress change took place. But also, considering what happened in RE2, like, she was putting on an act to seduce Leon, and it was working. Leon's going to come at this in a different way, if he has any character growth. And while I feel that the original game didn't really address that as great as it could have, the remake does. Ada has a different approach with Leon in this game, and I think it works, because especially when you get into separate ways, you see that she's using a different personality with Luis to get what she wants. That's how she rolls. But she knows that she can't necessarily pull the same trick on Leon twice, so she's going to be a little bit more actual in how she reacts to him and interacts with him. And I think that the new voice actress did a great job with that. Haters be damned. It makes sense. Everything makes more sense in terms of character motivations. Luis is a bigger part of the plot and actually hangs out with you more than just in the cabin. Krauser is reincorporated into the game differently, but it makes sense, more sense, honestly, for him to not be a second agent of Wesker's hanging out there, but to be a part of the cult, and working for them directly. That dynamic is really good. and makes it make a lot more sense. Instead of having 2 double agents or triple agents or whatever, it makes more sense for Krauser to have one dedicated focal point for who his allegiance is with. And with Ada, she can still be triple agency all she wants, because that's part of her already established canon. So all of that makes great sense. Salazar and Sadler are tweaked, and Mendez, they're all tweaked a little bit to make them a little bit more cult-like. It loses a bit of the action B-movie flair with Sadler especially, but Leon still has it. He's still rolling with it. He just lost a couple iconic lines. Your left hand comes off, and stuff like that. But the take on this is improved. The narrative is much better. It's much tighter. It's much more interesting. It's not as goofy or weird. But it is a nice evolution of like 2's more serious take into 4's still a little bit silly, but it's grounded in the same reality as 2 and 3, and ultimately the original RE remake is. So I appreciate all of that direction and change because it makes it a better game narratively. Gameplay-wise, they didn't mess with it too much. They added in a knife durability system and stealth encounters, which I think makes the gameplay even better. And the level design has been changed significantly to reflect some of these changes and to iron out some of the less interesting stuff, or give it to Ada so she has some interesting stuff in her campaign. Ultimately, the game just doesn't feel like it has any baggage or bloat. It's just like bam, bam, bam. And I could say that RE4 original had those issues of like, well, this just seems to be dragging on. All the fluff, all the unnecessary is trimmed right off, and it's freaking good. It's like it's only thing I could complain about in RE4 remake is that the command to use your knife is a little bit finicky sometimes. So like, there's a downed enemy, you're trying to knife them, but you're not right in the right spot, so they eventually stand up and second wave you. It's a little annoying sometimes, but that's it. Like, everything else is so good. I played through this game 3 times in a row. 3 times in a row. That's uncommon for me. And then Separate Ways was also in the middle of that. So I played through this game 4 times. 3 in the main campaign, once in Separate Ways. And when I talk about it, I want to play it again. It's that good. Like, when I talked about Street Fighter 6, I kind of wanted to play. When I talked about Tears of the Kingdom, I wanted to replay it a little bit. But, like, Resident Evil 4, I want to sit down and go through the entire thing again when I talk about it. Not just, like, jump in for a match or, like, wander around for an hour. No, I want to play the whole product. The entire experience. Top to bottom. Because there is nothing that I dislike heavily about it at all. That's why it's above Tears of the Kingdom. Is that it doesn't have a mechanic that I despise or dislike or find it's not cumbersome. And like, in contrast, like, oh, I'm not standing in the exact right spot is a little bit different than trying to grab a log and twist it around so it's facing the way you need it to face to stick to something else the exact right way, because the game doesn't know that you want the wheel to be this way to line up with the other wheel unless you set it up that way. That's the difference. That's the difference, is that I could jump into RE4 Remake and play it as intended without having to fight with it. With Tears of the Kingdom, I am going to probably have a moment where I'm going to have to Ultra Hand something, and it's not the mechanic I want to do. I want to fight stuff, and I want to get places. I want to explore. And sometimes when a world's that big, you have to come up with ways to get around it, and the way that Nintendo decided with the Ultra Hand, making that so central, is that even with fast travel, it's like, I don't really want to make a bike right now. I don't really want to make a glider right now. Oh, I have to make a glider right now? Okay, well that's unfortunate. I don't have the parts. I don't have the Zonai, not Zokai, Zonai, the Zonai stuff to make the stuff without the parts being here. That's a pain in the ass. See, that's the difference. That's why the two are so close to each other on my top 111, and yet Resident Evil 4 is above it. Because I could go through all of RE4 and I will not have any moment where I'm like, crap. That's why it's my game of the year. Thank you for joining me on this particular awards show and for your support through 2023. It has been an interesting year for sure, and we will see what 2024 brings, and we'll have a big old dual life perspective, predictions, and my top 5 most wanted games in the next episode. So until then, take care. Flavia agrees. Flavia thinks that Nemesis is also disappointing. She thought that Resident Evil 3 Nemesis was the better game, and so do I.